Hello everyone, The Nerdy Steve here, and today I'm going to be doing something different. Dominaria United rotates into Standard this upcoming week, and with that, we will be losing a lot of sets in Standard. And I think it'd be a fun farewell to look back at the different sets and maybe the different cards and mechanics, and to just reflect on what I personally liked or maybe even didn't like about the different sets. Maybe some cards or mechanics that I wish were more popular or cards that were a little less popular, and just talk about stuff thematically and what hit or missed for me. And I think that's just really, really cool. We've had a long time to play with these cards and look at, their potential and see what did or didn't live up to the hype. And I think that's a really cool thing to look back on and talk about. And I hope you find that interesting too. There's going to be a lot I don't cover here. So if there's anything you'd like to point out in the comments that I can maybe, add on to my next video or something, let me know. But yeah, let's go and have fun and talk about Zendikar Rising. So the very first thing I want to talk about when it comes to Zendikar Rising, and I think this is probably the most defining aspect of this set, are the modal double face cards. So we've seen double face cards before very often, like in the Innistrad sets, but usually those were cards that you would play on one side and then they would transform. And these cards, you have the immediate choice of playing either side the very first time you draw them. And this was very, very, very interesting and created a lot of speculation in their power level as everyone, had to approach specifically in limited, but everyone had to approach deck building as how much of a modal face card takes up a land slot, or vice versa. They enter the battlefield tapped, except for ones we'll talk about in a bit. And there was just a lot of really, really cool discovery with these cards that I really, really liked and appreciated. And I think these were a very, very big success for me. I think they added a lot of very, very cool choices when deck building. And, they weren't necessarily all very popular in constructed. There were a couple that have been played in constructed, right? So I think it definitely hit the right power level that they were going for. They weren't ubiquitously overpowered. You wouldn't play like 4 Sagiri's Shelter in your deck over 4 planes, right? Comes into play tapped was a really, really big trade-off. And so like it just had a really, really nice playability to it. And I'm saying that word a lot, but I think it just hit all the right levels of a brand new mechanic. There's always this fear of when, we get this brand new concept or thing introduced into Magic that it's going to like completely overtake, the game. Kind of like with Ikoria and Companion, how that was really uncharted territory, and that kind of just was not in any way, shape, or form successful. But these modal double face lands really, really hit the mark in how their impact on standard and in limited. They were playable, but not too playable. And so it's just like a really, really perfect blend of everything. And I'm very, very, very happy with how these turned out. These are two of my favorite ones, but really, they're all incredibly great. I have most of them in my like low powered cube because I really like, you know, I think they give you a really, really good agency in deck building and in drafting. And I think that's where these really, really shined, is they really let you have, as a drafter, you felt so good playing around with these and, choosing whether you wanted to pick them higher or lower than other people. And then in gameplay, right, choosing whether you have to hold on to this card or you want to get the tempo loss and play it tapped. So you have it untapped land the following turn, or, you really want to save it for the spell. There's just so much going on here. And these cards just were, I think, a really, really, really big home run. The only thing I want to talk about with these cards is the play in actual paper, and this is just my problem with a lot of the double face cards in general. And it's a nitpick, and it's a nitpick that happens, I feel differently on different days. But playing with these in paper, it's just sometimes having to physically flip over the card can just, it's a lot sometimes, and sometimes it just sucks, right? And like that's always a, just a little thing in the back of my head whenever stuff like this comes up. On Arena, where I play most of the time, it doesn't matter at all. And the modal face cards in this set, as opposed to, we'll discuss later when I get to, Strixhaven and Kaldheim, at least you always know what the land does on the back. Like Balajed Recovery is very, very simple on the back. Like, you don't need to take it out of the sleeve and look, right? You know that it's going to tap for 1 green mana. You know Sajiri Shelter is going to tap for 1 white mana, right? So, like, these hit really, for me, the simplicity of the Transformer double face cards that I really, really like. And so for that, it makes me feel a lot less that having to actually flip the cards, it takes a lot of that negativity that I personally feel. I know not everyone does, but if we're gonna talk about the pathways a little bit, which are lands that you can choose to have it enter on one side, which taps for like blue, and the other side, which taps for red. And for me, whenever I played with a pathway in real life, again, it's simple what each side does, but it's just having to take it out and flip it. It's a little bit of a chore, and I like the design, but like part of me is also like I could do without that. But I know I feel very, very strongly about the modal flip cards and transform cards. I like them on an Magic the Gathering arena level, but some days it really, really bothers me. Like, if you've ever tried to flip out a card and get it like stuck in a sleeve, maybe that hasn't happened to you, but it's happened to me a couple times, and it can just like, you're like, why do these cards even do that? So yeah. But there is something else I want to talk about when it comes to modal double face cards. So let's go there real quick. There is a mythic cycle of modal double face cards that have a really, really big spell and effect on the front side, and on the back side, the land taps for the color of the front side, but you can pay 3 life to have it enter the battlefield untapped. Unlike all the other modal face cards, which would always enter the battlefield tapped, these have the opportunity to enter the battlefield untapped. And I know going into it, people were maybe a little worried that these would just like always take the place of, a plains or an island. And that ended up not being the case here. And I just really, really think this cycle is one of the best developed cycles in Magic history. I'm going to say that I am very, very impressed with how this entire thing turned out. They all saw different levels of play, but they all saw play, and they were all very, very good and interesting, and never like overwhelmingly powerful. And I think that is a really, really good mark of how much of a home run this mechanic is, but how well developed these cards were. Amiria's Call wasn't a 4 of in every single white aggressive deck or white control deck. Aghanim's Awakening wasn't either in the black decks. These were just all really, really powerful, interesting, cool effects. And it just, I don't know, something about this cycle makes me really, really happy. It's something where I want every single Magic the Gathering cycle, specifically at, rare or mythic, to strive to be, where, not everything is four of, like, the blue one probably saw the least amount of play, but it still saw play, and it was still really, really good in the different decks that wanted to use it. So, like, it just, I don't know. There's something about this cycle that makes me very, very, very happy. It was nice and splashy. It was cool. It feels very mythic. Like all the front sides of the cards are really cool and interesting. Yeah, the red one only deals damage, but it can deal a lot of damage. The green one being able to, get that creature, it just like it they're just so cool, big splashy things. And then like the deck building aspect of, do these take up a land slot or a non-land slot? And the answer is, it's kind of neither. It takes its own little room for it, and then you have to, adjust accordingly, right? So it's like just a really, really cool mechanic, and the mythic rares took the modal face cards and kind of changed them in a way that, how the other cards played, and it was really, I think it's just really, really cool. The 3 life was a choice that, when looking at it initially, I thought it actually wasn't enough. I thought maybe it should have been 4 life. But then once you play with it, you go, oh, 3 life's actually a huge cost for this land to enter the battlefield tapped. My bad. I apologize. And yeah, so this is just a home run of a cycle for me, and I'm just wondering, was this good for you? Did you like it? What was your favorite card? If I look at it, I'm trying to figure out which one I've actually cast the most. And it's a toss up between Agadeem's Awakening and Shatter Skull Smashing. And I think Agadeem's Awakening wins for me because I played a lot of rogues. So that was always in there. But let me know what one you played the most. And if you agree with this, I think this is a home run of a cycle. And yeah. So let's move on to other Zendikar Rising mechanics. The next mechanic we're going to talk about is Kicker. So Kicker is something that's been around for a really, really, really long time, and it's also coming back in Dominaria United. And I am not the biggest Kicker fan. To me, it is, a little flavorless, and it doesn't necessarily do anything very interesting. Like, I'd rather there be other stuff going on with cards. And I think with specifically Zendikar Rising, they're just, it just seemed too generic for me. We had a really, really cool cycle of the Inscription of Abundance. There wasn't a white one, which was also very, very interesting. But the Inscription of Abundance cycle was really, really cool, and I think that was a decent use of Kicker, like where it's like the all or nothing thing. It made it feel, you know, it was a new take kind of on what it did. It didn't just do a little more, it did a lot more. Because now instead of only choosing one of the 3 modes, you get 3 out of the 3. And that's cool. But other than that, it seems like tacked on to a lot of cards. There was Rooster Drakes right there, which is an enchantment that whenever you cast a kick spell, you create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token. And that made a kicker deck very, very relevant in Limited. But I felt, for me, if kicker is just going to be added onto cards, I kind of want it to mean something. So I really wish there was more Rooster Drake type effects in Zendikar Rising. And like I think there may have been like 1 or 2 more, but I just wish it like was a little bit, more. It just seemed, I think like if you're gonna have something like kicker, having a more thematic thing or like a little change on it would be really, really nice. We've seen multi kicker before, and in Dominaria United, the kicker is off color on all the cards, and so it really adds an interesting, cool deck building aspect to it. Like, and I really, really like that. It allows, your gold cards to be monocolored cards when, you don't have the mana, or you just don't need the second color when you're building your limited deck. And I really, really I love that. I think that's really, really cool design and a cool place for Kicker to be. This just, it just, for me, it didn't hit where I would like it to be. As someone who doesn't really like Kicker that much, it just seemed very, very added on, and it doesn't do anything flavor wise. Like, it didn't really do anything cool or interesting except with the Inscription of Abundance. Like, I think if, there were more, inscription like cards and maybe more Rooster Drake cards, I would have really, really been a lot more positive in this section. But I don't know. It Maybe you feel differently. I know a lot of people really, really like Kicker, and I'm kind of in the minority in that way. So let me know what you like about it. I also like the gameplay aspect of it too. That's unrelated to why I don't like it, right? The gameplay is really, really cool because, oh, if you don't have the mana, then you can still cast the card and you just don't get the really, really big, cool effect, right? But I don't know. To me, it makes me, it's a very lukewarm card. It does, mechanic. It doesn't really excite me. It's more of the cards that excite me. And I don't know, it always feels like there could be something that they do differently with Kicker that, isn't being done. Like, again, with the Dominaria United or Multi-Kicker. We know there is stuff that can be done. And I just wish we kind of saw a little more of that and less of the same stuff we've been seeing with Kicker. I don't know. Let me know. What is your favorite Kicker card from this set? Because I think mine is actually the Inscription of Abundance. I think it's really, really cool. So, I don't know. But now let's move on to something else. So now we have Landfall. And Landfall is a returning mechanic from the original Zendikar, where whenever land enters the battlefield, you do something cool. And I say that because cool may or may not be something that's applicable to all of these Landfall cards. And while I like Landfall gameplay wise, rewarding players for, if top decking lands usually is really, really bad and terrible, right? Most people just hate that. But if you have Landfall cards, right, it makes that top deck really, really cool. Like, oh, I drew a land, but I get to trigger my Landfall. And that's fun. But the problem here is kind of like with Kicker. Landfall just seemed to be something to put on things, and there wasn't really this really nice overlap of Landfall matters cards. There weren't a lot of ways to trigger it specifically in limited, twice in one turn to get these really cool big bonuses, and a lot of the cards themselves just weren't very, very standard playable. We have the exception to the rule, which is Omnath, which, got banned basically right away. And Omnath is one of the most powerful cards printed in a really, really, really long time, right? So, like, when I say it wasn't exciting, I think, like, more of the general instead of, the really, the one that's slightly above average, right? Omnath was really, really cool, really, really interesting, but sadly, way too powerful, and I think that also kind of, part of me feels like Omnath in testing was a really, really powerful thing that was going on. And so all the other landfall abilities were kind of like toned down a bit to like compensate for that power level. We see there are a lot of green red aggressive landfall creatures that like just get +2/+2 until end of turn. Like we have Kazandu Mammoth, but there's other Gruul 2-drop and a mono and a red 1-drop that also get +2/+2. But that like deck didn't really necessarily come together, and so it was not very particularly memorable. And then we also had Ruin Crab, which was a very, very popular mill card in the Rogue deck. But, you don't necessarily want your Landfall card to be attributed to mill, because that's, like, really no fun for anyone. And once the Rogue deck rotated out of Standard, a Ruin Crab kind of just didn't see any play. And I think that's where a lot of this comes from, is like these are all cards that kind of saw play, and Skyclave was a card with kicker. Skyclave Shade that also saw play. It has kicker and landfall. And but like the cards were kind of played less because of landfall and more because of just other things and other combo stuff. And to me, I wish like there were just a little better landfall application in standard. Kazandu Mammoth gets +2/+2 whenever a land enters the battlefield, but it was more played because, as we previously discussed, in mono green, because it was a modal face card, right? You could play as a land, but it also, when you drew it late, it was a 3/3 creature. And so that was really, really cool and good for those types of decks. And like I don't know what I would want. You know, in the original Zendikar, there were the fetch lands that worked with landfall, right? So you could play your land and then crack it to get another land, and you would get, two triggers. I think this was in the same set with Fabled Passage, or same standard with Fabled Passage, so you were able to do that to a lesser extent in standard. But again, it just never really came together, and there were some times where it was fine, like Felidar Retreat has gone in and out of popularity and playability because it can do some really cool things. But like overall, the landfall just, it was missing a type of cohesion that I was really, really wanting and looking for. Uh, Flavor wise on Zendikar, most of like the, I think it's like the non, like the animals or non-human wildlife or something like that all have landfall, or not all, but like that's where landfall goes on. It's on these like monsters and crabs and elephants, right? And I think that's cool, but I just wish it was a little more impactful, or did maybe something a little more, cohesive. Or there was more support for it too. And I think, I think it's partially to blame for Omnath. I think Omnath was a very, very powerful card, and they were like, let's try to not make a lot of other cards that go with it, and hopefully that will, level its power level. And that didn't really work, and I think maybe the entire like landfall mechanic then kind of, was punished for that, and how hard it was pushed. I don't know. We can only assume. Who knows? But landfall, I like it. Has some really cool cards, right? But overall, again, it just like didn't hit it out of the park as much as I would have really loved it to. What do you think? Were there any other landfall cards that you liked? Again, Ruin Crab, I played with a lot of Ruin Crab, and so I milled plenty of people out, and so I really like that. But again, I think if Ruin Crab is, the most playable landfall card in your set that, wasn't banned, there might be a problem there. Or can Kazandu Mammoth was probably played more. I don't know if throughout all of the release, and I'm not going to do that math. But like those two cards, you have a mill card and then like a 3-drop, right? And that's not the most exciting stuff in the world. But with that, let's go talk about something else and something new. Party, party, party. Uh, in a theoretical world, I love Party. And how it was actually implemented, it kind of left us wanting for more, right? It just never reached to its full potential that I think we wanted to be, or that the designers wanted it to be too. And I don't really know what necessarily went wrong. So Party is something that, you know it scales of 1 or 0 to 4 based on if you have a cleric, a rogue, a warrior, or a wizard on the battlefield. So once you have all four of those, you have a full party, and some effects trigger from having a full party. Some things scale depending on how many members of your party you have, right? And I think the deck and the mechanics just never really came together, and I don't know why. Like, there was never really a party deck. There were like cleric decks, there were rogue decks. Warriors didn't really become a thing, and wizards are kind of a thing too. But like there was more support for the individual tribes in the party than it seemed like the party mechanic altogether. We have base camp here, which is a pretty really important party support card, but this card was not good at all. And actually in alchemy, where they change the cards, it is much much better to help support the party mechanic, right? So I think like it just didn't get all the support that it wanted. But I do want to talk about, I think there was a concept from Ixalan, which was a set released a couple years ago. And on Ixalan, they had merfolks, they had dinosaurs, and they had vampires, and they had pirates, right? And the tribes never crossed, right? Everything was unique, and that left the draft environment and the constructed environment kind of wanting for a little more, because like it just, the things didn't mesh well together. And part of me wonders why that wasn't a choice for Zendikar. Like, why couldn't, you have Linvala, or like Linvala and maybe another angel or something be on the same card, and then you can have an angel wizard cleric. So this one card, it would only count for one party because party looks at specific cards, but it makes it easier to develop a full party if multiple creatures have, multiple types on it, instead of having to have everything line up perfectly. And there were mechanics like that in Zendikar with there was a pack mate, I think, which counted as one of each, and there were a lot of green cards like that counted as one of each party member, so it kind of fill in that gap. And I think that just needed to happen more throughout the set for it to become a really, really very supported and powerful thing. Because even in, limited, right? It just, most of your parties only had two members in it. Like, you were really, you getting the party was a bonus, it wasn't necessarily a goal, and maybe that was the objective of the mechanic, but it just never really saw standard play. And party wasn't really a thing in limited. A lot of it was just, you built your cleric deck, you built your warrior deck, right? You focused on just one specific tribe. And I think that's a shame. There was a lot of potential and a lot of cool stuff that could have happened, and it just never really, did its thing. And I'm really looking forward. I hope we come back to it because I think it's a really, really cool thing. And I think now that they've already played around with it and know, what happened and why it may have not been so successful, we can see it in the future and get more cool things going on with it. So you let me know if you agree or disagree with this. If you like party, I love it because I think that little mini game is really, really fun. Like Linvala here, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have a full party, choose target non-land permanent an opponent controls. And then until your next turn, it can't attack or block, and it can't activate abilities. Like, that's so cool. Like, being able to lock out something for an entire turn. But the problem was getting a full party, it wasn't a good payoff for what you had to do to accomplish it, right? And that's kind of what happened throughout the party altogether. And so it was just, and I really wish it was better because I saw a lot of the cards and was very, very excited, but in practicality, right, it just never lived up to its full potential. And I hope we can, if we revisit the party mechanic in the future, and I'm sure we will, we'll be able to do that a lot more. Thank you for watching me ramble about Zendikar Rising. I had a fun time making this video and talking about all these cards, and I hope it was at least somewhat entertaining for you. I think it's really, really important as Magic players to sometimes look back on the different sets that we play and really critically think about why we like stuff or didn't like stuff. And I think that's important because it allows us to grow as players of this game, and we can then understand, why if you don't like a specific format or a specific set, I think it's really cool to understand why. So maybe you can try and maybe learn to change that so you can enjoy Magic on a more broader scale. Or, it just helps you figure out what you like and don't like. And so, maybe you can just build your commander decks differently and avoid different mechanics, or, know why different decks appeal to you in standard that others don't. And I just think that's really, really cool to, look at things and go, oh, wow, I really like this, or oh, wow, I didn't like this, right? There's just so much magic to consume and so many cards. And sometimes we forget about things that existed. Like, literally looking back at this, I was looking at cards and I was like, oh wow, this was in Zendikar Rising. I don't remember this mechanic at all. And, I think that's really, really cool. And yeah, I hope you like this video. If you haven't already, you should totally like, comment, or subscribe. And yeah, you can watch me stream live at twitch.tv/thenerdysteve. And I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon wherever you are. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.